Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy247 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast.
Welcome into the Vandy247 podcast. I'm your host, Billy Derrick, alongside Chris Lee and Luke Wyatt on a Wednesday morning here in Nashville. We are a part of the Believe Network. We're brought to you by Sanders Moving. We'll talk a little bit of baseball today. Also, the Wash House, Sutherland and Belk, sponsors the mailbag. John Levin and his company, Wobblebond Dickinson, Yeaman Packaging Systems, as well as Bulovas Wealth Management for all of our football coverage. But we'll be talking some football today. We are 52 days away from the kickoff of the season. I feel like it's already here. Media days next week. The attendees have been announced. We'll talk a little bit about that. We got some fun mailbag questions today, though, guys. A lot of, the dog days kind of wrapping up here. We got some good dog days questions. So we'll get to some of those. But guys, how we doing?
Good. Doing great.
All good.
We just got through talking about the Brave struggles and not a whole lot of positives there. But luckily if you're a Vandy fan and Braves fan, you've got a good football season at least to look forward to. So we'll be talking a lot about that. I do want to tell you about Bulovas Wealth Management, our football sponsor all season long. Joe, former kicker, obviously is a big Vanderbilt fan still, goes to the games. He's going to be a part of our coverage this year. He enjoys providing superior service by putting his clients first. Raymond James' comprehensive financial planning gives their clients a truly integrated and tailored approach to wealth management. At the end of the day, they just enjoy working hard for great people. Raymond James, life well planned. Log on to raymondjames.com/Bulovas Wealth Management for more info. Media days next week, guys. Clark Lee will be joined by Diego Pavia, Randon Fontenette, and Martel Height. And Luke, I don't think Pavia is a surprise. Randon Fontenette, I think we talked about as a guy that could probably be there. Martel Height was a little bit surprised. No Eli Stowers announced. So, but either way, it's somebody said this on the board. It's going to be a fun media days with Pavia.
Yeah, it will be. They got to maybe keep tighten the reins on him a little bit. I don't know. I think smart enough to know, though, in more formal sitting like that he's not on a podcast where he can just let his hair down. So I think he'll be fine. With Eli not going, that didn't really surprise me because Eli's a quiet kid. I don't think that's the thing. So he may not have been real comfortable with that. But I'm excited. I mean, what are we, 7 weeks away, I guess?
Chris, it's going to be – I would love to be a fly on the wall in the, the bus ride from the hotel to the College Football Hall of Fame with Clark and those guys.
I'm laughing because Luke said something along the lines of keeping Diego in line. I'm just curious, like what the plan, what the talk for that would look like if you could see it. So,
what exactly does that entail?
Shot collar.
There have been worse ideas.
Oh man, that's gonna be fun. I mean, when's the last time Vanderbilt had? It's probably Robbie Caldwell, where, and obviously James Franklin, he would typically say, something that would make headlines. But I mean, Luke, you remember the Robbie Caldwell viral media days appearance? That might be, sort of the last time Vanderbilt. I mean, we had Clark Lee's comment, that went crazy, and look, it's all talk. I know people get sick of media days. Especially the amount of media that's there now is a little ridiculous. But I mean, the last time Vanderbilt had a player or a coach that you would expect to make waves was probably Robbie Caldwell, which is one of the all-time great SEC media day moments.
Yeah, the old turkey inseminator. And Robbie, I tell you what was great, and I don't know if you guys remember, but that was kind of when pregame or pre-practice music started. You know, it used to be you didn't have any music before practice or during stretch or anything. And during stretch, his first song, the players would just roll their eyes. His first song every day was let's see, "Drop Kick Me Jesus to the Goalpost of Life." That was what, and it was pretty funny. It was really. I tell you what, he came up with some funny things.
That had to really get the adrenaline flowing.
Oh, they're all pumped, but it was during slow stretch, so I guess the timing of it. If you're going to play, that's the time to play it.
He remains my absolute favorite person to ever deal with among all the people who are no longer there.
Me too.
100%.
You know, there's a lot of coaches I still keep in touch with, but we talk regularly, and he's, man, just a great man. Not just a coach, just a great man.
I haven't talked to him in years. I used to text him every now and then, but tell him I said hello, please.
I will do that for sure.
Yeah.
So we got media days next week, and Luke, fall camp. I want to say, is it July 28th?
28th or 29th, yeah.
That Monday is the 28th. So after media days, you got a week, and then boom, fall camp's here, and classes start August 13th. I want to say that Wednesday. So guys, we're basically right here. We're preseason talk, and we got a lot of mailbag questions on the football part of the season as well. I want to touch on some women's basketball. I know we know about the Camille Pierre situation, but what Michaela Blakes has done overseas, I mean, you can't ignore that. Like that is, I mean, 27 points, MVP of the entire tournament. She was named to the the top 5 team, the Fab. I don't know, they call it the Fab Five. I forget what they call that. But she's one of 2 American players on that top 5 there. Guys, I mean, when it comes to basketball, men's and women's, when you combine, I don't know if Vanderbilt has had as skilled of a player at her age, at her, her talent level, maybe ever.
No, I used to really follow women's basketball years ago when I was at Vandy. I did the PA for it a couple times. And Cherie Sam, I don't know if anybody remember that name, but she was really, really talented. She played in the WNBA back, or whatever it was back then, for a short period of time. But she's probably the most athletic kid I ever saw until Michaela got there. And she's a cut above. She's special. Excuse me.
Yeah, I haven't followed it. I will say this: every time I've heard her speak or sing things, the thing I appreciate about her is there seems to be a level of maturity and humility.
Yes.
That is not often common with people in that spotlight, and so you kind of root for a person like that just for that alone.
Right.
All right, y'all ready for the mailbag? We've got a lot of questions, and a lot of them are good and interesting ones that'll probably have us talking for a while. So I didn't want to take too much time up. I do want to tell you about the mailbag sponsor, Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. They sponsor the chat room and today's mailbag. We are live. If you want to fire away any questions, feel free to do so. If your loved one has been hurt or in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call at 615-846-6200 to learn about your rights and whether they can help. Also, our guest line with Chris and Luke, brought to you by John Levin, good friend of the show, Wobble Bond Dickinson. Thanks to the student athletes at Vanderbilt for their dedication, effort, and hard work. Guest line also brought to you by Yeaman Packaging Systems, leaders in end-of-line packaging automation. All right, we're going to start with Vandy Fan 615, and this is a good one. What would your Mount Rushmore of all-time Vanderbilt football players be? Robbie's top 20 series for this season has me thinking how I'd rank the top players in program history, which, by the way, Robbie's doing a really good job of that. Log on to Vandy247.com to check those out. But, guys, Mount Rushmore, I've got mine, so I'm going to give you mine. I don't know if y'all already have yours, but this will be a kind of a good ramble period. For me, it's hard not to put Jay Cutler in there, just for me, and mine will be different probably than y'all's because I'm younger. But Jay Cutler, for me, was – I mean, that was my guy. Like growing up, I still remember watching the 05 Tennessee game in the living room with my dad, watching them win that game. So I had to put Jay Cutler up there. this could be controversial, but I got to have James Franklin up there. What he did in a short amount of time, and I know Vanderbilt fans out there still are not the biggest James Franklin fans, but you can't deny what he did. It's never been done, and it may not ever be done again. What he did to the level, and in such a short amount of time and so quickly. So I got to have James Franklin up there. And then a couple of receivers, and this is where it was hard. The next two guys, it was like, I need to have Cutler and Franklin there, but how am I going to fill the rest of it out? I threw Earl Bennett and Jordan Matthews on there. Earl Bennett, I feel like if you have Cutler, you got to have Bennett. And then Jordan Matthews, just, I mean, one of the best SEC receivers ever in terms of receptions. And, you know, I know there was a lot of screen passes in there, but he was still really good, obviously playing in the NFL for a little bit. And then some honorable mentions, guys, Whit Taylor, Diego Pavi. I think if he has another good year this year, he may be on it, especially if he beats Tennessee. Alama Matthews is a guy I thought about. Kurt Page. It's kind of a fun exercise to go through that, but Luke, that's who I would have.
Yeah, it's hard for me to pick 4 or 5 guys, but I'll go back all the way old school on you. I'll take Bill Wade as the quarterback, and then Dan McGugin as the coach, Coach McGugin. Jordan Matthews has to be on there as a receiver. Probably the best running back they ever had there was Frank Mordecai. Played in the 70s, ran for 335 yards in one game. I think that's still Vanderbilt record. And it was the NCAA record for a long, long time. But there's just too many for me to name. I could sit here and name 1,000. So, Chris, whoever you think.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you want to go. I know football was a much different game then, but Vanderbilt football in its heyday was 100 years ago-ish and more. And I think the guy that was the foundation of that was Dan McGugin. I think to me, he's got to be on there. If you're looking for a player in that era, and he was a center, but man, he is all over All-American teams. I just did a Google search, by the way, for Vanderbilt players in the College Football Hall of Fame. They are John Tigert, not even sure who that is, maybe a coach, Josh Cody, Lynn Bomar, Bill Spears, and Carl Hinkle. Carl Hinkle is probably the guy that is probably the most well-known and respected player at the time. So if you're going to go back to the time when Vanderbilt football was at its best, I think McGugan's got to be in there. And if you're going to pick a player, it's probably him. Could be Josh Cody. I've looked up these guys before and studied them a little bit, but it's been a few years.
Yeah,
I think this is where I have trouble. Bill Wade was a very high-profile quarterback. He was the first pick of the draft, although it was kind of a flukish thing. I think the draft was a lot different then. Quarterback the Bears for 10 or 12 years very successfully, was an All-American, I think, at Vanderbilt, and I think won an NFL championship before the Super Bowl. And I think, so to me, I think those three probably have to be on there. I feel like if you want to include pro success, Jay Cutler's got to be your 4th guy. But I have a hard time not putting Jordan Matthews on there because he's a major SEC record holder, played on some successful teams. And then Zach Cunningham, another guy. Although I think that, Jamie Winburn and Jamie Duncan were awfully phenomenal players too, with kind of a longer peak than he had. I guess if push came to shove and I had to take 4 guys, and again, some of this is going to be based on pro accomplishments too, and kind of what they did for the brand, I think I would go Hinkle, McGugin, Cutler, and Bill Wade. With the apologies to Jordan Matthews, and you could easily argue him on there too.
There's one person I do want to mention who probably as an individual on a team that had poor defenses, without him, I'm not sure we'd ever stopped anybody, was Chris Gaines.
Yes.
Against Tulane, where he had 37 tackles. I mean, that's unbelievable. But Chris Gaines has to be on there defensively as well.
You're talking about Dan McGugin, Luke, and it's incredible going back and looking. He was there from 1904 to 1934. So you're right. He built it. He built everything. And you go back after that, there wasn't a single coach that came even close to that. Now that was early 1900s, right? But to even be there, 10 years, you didn't see many coaches be there. So it's an interesting question. There's the thing about Vanderbilt football, guys, and y'all probably realize this as well, that, there's players like, I don't know, even in the Franklin era, there were players that, did a lot, but maybe were unsung. Like, I still think Patton Robinette has one of the more important plays in Vanderbilt history, the fake jump pass beating Tennessee. But not many people talk about him. He's he medically retired as a doctor now. There's so many players like that, like a Winborn or a Duncan. Chris, you could go on, that maybe because they play for Vanderbilt or because they didn't have a ton of other talent around them, there's not much talk about them. But there's a lot of players like that you go back and look at, and do deserve credit.
It's kind of a footnote. I always find myself as sort of for lack of a better term, the resident Jay Cutler apologist. I've always just kind of wondered what happens if you change a few things in his career. Like, you give him an offensive line, you give him a little better talent, you give him that with the Bears too. I mean, the diabetes thing, I've never had it from what I understand. I talked to someone once that said, like, I don't know how Jay Cutler did what he did with diabetes. And I know that Jay gets a bad rap for all the reasons people can name, some fair, probably some unfairly. Kind of reminds me, like, I had a dog once, long before. He's the only dog I've ever had that was in the ballpark of difficulty with Oreo. And he was Max, and I love Max, and ended up having to give him to my parents because he didn't mix well with kids. And we would always, kind of make jokes about Max, and my dad would always say, Max isn't a bad dog, he's just misunderstood. And I feel like there's like some of that with Jay Cutler. Like, I just think there was so much stuff that always happened around Jay that just was kind of like, man, if you gave him a little bit of a different lot, what would that have looked like? Because, man, the talent was absolutely there, and he carried them to some wins. He and Earl Bennett did.
Well, I'll give you guys a Jay Cutler story. When we went to his draft party when he was drafted by the Broncos, I guess the 11th overall pick, maybe. And instead of taking coaches or high-profile people, he invited myself, my assistant, Chris Singleton, John Sisk, a couple of others to celebrate. After he'd done that, he said, guys, meet me on Lower Broad. We're going to do a bar crawl. He paid for everything, and we went around the loop. Some of us made it once, some of us made it twice, but that's the kind of guy Jay was if he liked you. If you were in Jay's corner, he'd do anything for you. Now, Jay views the world as black and white. There's no gray area. You're either with him or you're against him. And, if there's any fault with Jay, it's because he's not too forgiving, I'd say.
All right, this is another good one from Vandy fan Pate. Top 3 Vanderbilt football worst overturned / unfavorable referee calls to memory. For instance, the Earl Bennett excessive celebration call against Florida in 2006. For me, and y'all probably go back further, but for me, it's not even close. Because I was at this game, but 2012, the no pass interference call on Jordan Matthews late in the game was just over 2 minutes left, 4th and 7. You had Jordan Matthews in the slot. DJ Swearinger, who's a great player for South Carolina, ripped his arm down. No call. He would have, you say he would have caught it. There's always a chance he drops it. But that's 4th and 7. You're setting yourself up. They're down. They were down 17-13 and marching. And you always feel like if you make that play, you win the game. I just remember that one being brutal to handle. And then, you go back even more recently, which was very egregious. A couple of years ago, no roughing the passer against A.J. Swan, that Clark Lee was just beside himself. So there's so many, but I think for me, guys, I look back at the no pass interference call of Jordan Matthews, but I forgot a lot. It was hard for me to think back, probably because there's too many.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the one that first comes to mind was the celebration penalty on Earl Bennett. I think I've told this story before, but Robbie Caldwell told me once. He said I saw the lineman, one of the linesmen on that drive. He said we're about to go down, and I said we're about to go down and score and win this ball game. So don't call a BS flag on us. And then that happened. As they were going to go for two and try to get the win in a swamp where they didn't win for a long time until James Franklin finally got one, I believe. But that's one that's always top of mind. I think the no face mask call on Jay Cutler at Ole Miss. Luke, you remember that one? I think it was
Ole Miss.
One of the coaches had that on his wall for a long time. I remember above a light switch, and Jay's head is turned almost to a point like I think if it was turned any further, it's going to come off his shoulders at that point. That was no call on that. The Matthews call was a big one. Larry Leathers used to talk about one time that Vanderbilt went to Alabama. I don't think this was a TV game, and he said they scored 3 times on the same drive on like an end goal play, and none of them were allowed. That was one that always stuck out to me. I don't really remember it. And I don't know, there's more there, but I think the Earl Bennett one always sticks in everybody's mind. The face mask one, like with the picture of that to drive it. Oh, I know the one I was forgetting. Luke, you'll remember this. Vanderbilt's playing Rutgers when Rutgers was bad in a back-and-forth game. It was, I think, 03-ish.
Yeah.
And Cutler threw just an absolute bomb. Rolled right, threw about a ball that was about 60 yards in the air. I can't remember if it was caught for a touchdown or it put them like inside the 5. But it was an unbelievable throw with a couple of minutes left. And this was before replay. They threw a flag and called him for going past the line. And I think on the replay you saw like he was a full 2 yards short of going over the line. That one probably cost them a ball game. That was one that they were just unbelievably upset about, and rightfully so.
Well, I'll go back and tell you this much. But before replay, and I did an interview with The Athletic years ago, and we talked about this. Before replay, Vanderbilt and whoever happened to be, this was when the conference had 10 teams, whoever happened to be at the bottom, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, whoever, it happened to them a whole lot more than it did. And I even had an official tell me one time, we're playing Florida. I may have told this story on here before, but bear with me. We're going down. We lost this game to Florida 13-7. We're going down for the winning touchdown. And we have it first and 10 at their 21, plenty of time, like 45 seconds left. 1st and 10, we throw a touchdown, and they call it back, call a holding call. We still hadn't seen the holding call on film, none of us, when we went back to Nashville. You can't find it anywhere. And there was a side judge that I knew from playing. Actually, I played softball with him. He was from Nashville. And I was talking to him during a timeout at that time, and I said, Eddie, what in the world? He said, Luke, think about this. If y'all beat Florida tonight, this costs the SEC $1 million. He told me that's so that, and I said, well, what are we even doing here? So that happened to not just Vanderbilt, the 2 or 3 teams that were low in the league. I think just never got the benefit of the doubt. They're down here. They're not supposed to beat Florida, and we're not going to let them. Because we know in the SEC office, they'd rather Florida win this game. And that's a shame. Now, since replay, it's gotten a little better. I can give you a game we would not have won. And Billy alluded to it earlier. Remember the official at Tennessee, I think it's the game that when Patton ran the touchdown in.
Yes.
A 4th down.
Exactly where you're going.
And it was obviously past the chains. And we had to challenge it. The referee was almost like a full yard short. And if we hadn't challenged that, the game was over. We lose 7-6 or whatever it was, 10-6, whatever. So that's happened. But the most egregious one, there was a guy who played in the NFL for a long time, played at Tennessee, named Willie Gault. And we're playing Tennessee in Knoxville. We wound up losing the game like 38-34. We would have won the game if it hadn't been for this call. There's a painted area that the coaches are in that the referees run in. Well, he makes supposedly makes a catch in that area. So both feet are out of bounds. Well, he never even caught it. It hit his shoulder pads, and a guy who was not in the game standing beside him snagged the ball real quick. The official said the pass was complete. Rick Risser, our safety, got thrown out of the game. It's definitely the most egregious call against Vanderbilt in history. No, nothing close. Nothing.
Lawrence on YouTube comments, wait, Vandy was outplaying Oklahoma in 1977. Martin Cox scored on a pass in the last quarter, and there was a clipping call, which no one else saw. Yeah, I was there. I was running balls. What's amazing was he was in the end zone, and we were getting ready to celebrate, and the official reached into his pocket and just calmly dropped a flag. At the time, I think Oklahoma was number one.
You know, the time I think calls feel like they've been a lot more fair to Vanderbilt since replay. And I'll remember one that I thought, boy, times have changed. They were playing Georgia one year under Franklin, and Georgia had a safety thrown out for targeting, and it was pretty questionable. And I thought, there's one that you don't see a lot. A key player on a brand team getting thrown out on a borderline / questionable / bad call, depending on how you saw it. It's been a long time, but that was one that it's like, wow, that's not something you see much.
Yeah, and let me make this clear. It's not just Vanderbilt. It was back then whoever happened to be the bottom 2 or 3 teams.
Somebody on the board chimed in and said DiNardo era inadvertent whistle call on the South Carolina game wiped out a scoop and score. Likely cost us a bowl game. As we finished 5-6.
Yep. Anyway, there's been so many, and I'm sure I've forgotten as many as there were that were worse than what I even said.
Yeah, certain things trigger your memory on a certain game, so we might even think of some more. But that's a really good question. Okay, this is Anchor Down 2401. What do you view as the football team's floor and ceiling? I'm guessing they're asking record-wise. Do we win one or multiple of the road SEC games? And if so, who? I put the floor at 3-9. And look, it could be worse. You know, maybe it's 2-10. I think at the very least, at the very worst, Pavia gets hurt and all hope is lost, and that, you know, they don't win any SEC games. I put the ceiling at 8-4. And look, I know they talk about the playoff and they talk about, you know, making it there. And Clark Lee even said that. He said, we're as close to going 10-2 as we are 2-10. I'm not sure I'm that far with it, but I do think this team all goes right. Some breaks go their way. Maybe more than just some breaks go their way. They had a lot of breaks go their way last year is what you got to remember. I think if they get the same, if not more amount of breaks go their way, and Pavia plays the season of his life, Stowers stays healthy, the defense is able to eliminate big plays, I think they could get to 8, but I'll put their ceiling at that. And then do we win one or more of the road SEC games? And if so, who? That's a tough one. South Carolina, they haven't beaten them since 2007. At Alabama, when's the last time? Have they ever won in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, 84.
Okay, yeah, 84. So it's been since 84. At
Come
Texas.
on, Billy, you should know that. We went through all that after the Alabama post game.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. But at Texas, have they ever won there?
Yeah, but we're the only team in the SEC with a winning record against Texas.
That's true.
That was back with even before I was born, believe it or not.
And then at Tennessee, that's a
keep
tough.
Dan McGugan on the mountain just for that, right?
That's right.
Yeah. It's tough to say they'll win one or multiple of the road SEC games. I think the one that's most likely, gosh, I guess South Carolina, and maybe even Tennessee. Maybe I'd go Tennessee, but no to the second part of that question. But I'll go floor 3-9, ceiling 8-4. Luke, I don't know what you'd say.
I got the floor as 4-8. That's if we have multiple injuries at key positions. And I think I'm kind of with you. I think 8's the max because of how tough the schedule is. You know, Chris alluded to something the last podcast we did, that this year they're not going to be able to sneak up on anybody. And that's, you know, you're not going when you go to Bama this time and Texas this time, they're not going to take you as lightly as they may have last year.
Yeah, I think if you want to go really pessimistic. I could see a floor at 2-10. I wouldn't pick it. And here's my reasoning. I think they should beat Charleston Southern, Georgia State, and Utah State pretty handily. But we saw Georgia State a year ago. So I think you have to say that's losable. And I was looking at some, just the kind of building a model with some power rankings that are out there. They're only going to be favored to win one SEC game. That's Kentucky. That's by about probably 3 or 4 points. All the rest, they are favored to lose. Now, I think they'll do better than that. But I think, to me, I was looking at Alabama yesterday. Alabama's pretty loaded. Texas is going to be a lot of people's number one. Those two feel pretty unwinnable. LSU feels, I'm not going to say unwinnable, but a really tough ask because they're talented offensively, and then they get some big defensive players back. And I feel South Carolina, my goodness. I mean, I think they could have a 500 to 100-yard edge in total offense on South Carolina, and I still wouldn't be convinced they'd win that game just based on the way that series has gone. Plus, they're pretty good. Now, you get them earlier in the season when Shane Beamer's teams typically don't play as well. But to me, those are the 4 games that are tough wins for me. I think Tennessee feels like it's going to be in play. Potentially, that's in Knoxville, where they played pretty well. And I think a lot of those other games in between are up for grabs.
Yeah, I mean, Virginia Tech is such a big game for me because if you win that, similar to the one last year, they won that game, and all of a sudden you're thinking a lot differently about what the team can do. Virginia Tech's gonna have revenge on their mind, and I know there's a lot of Vanderbilt fans that are confident about that, and I mean, they have the right to be, but they have drones back. No more Chris Marv with Virginia Tech, and so that's a big one early week 2. I do want to try to go to that. Have you all ever been up to Blacksburg for a game?
Mm-hmm.
Like a froze to death there, yeah.
I saw them beat Rutgers 49-42 in a game. I was in Blacksburg that weekend and just decided to go see them. It's been a while.
I would love. I mean, that's up there with a game at App State. That's the scenery and the intro, of course. That's going to be tough, but that's a big one for them, and we'll have more time to break down the schedule. But here's an interesting question from VA72, and I'm gonna X myself out of this one. But how practical would it be for Vanderbilt, Vandy United, and or the NIL collective over time to create one or more endowments that would be so well funded that much of the annual funds needed for athletics would be generated by returns of investments owned by the endowments? I read that some of the big donors may be getting wary of yearly contributions to NIL, for example. With the development of large endowments, the whales might glimpse some light at the end of the tunnel when their contributions could become lighter. I don't even know where to start there, so I'll toss that one to y'all.
Chris, go ahead.
Well, ideally, yeah. I still think there's other things they need first. Let's have that conversation when they get the indoor facility built and the weight room taken care of and finish the baseball stuff. I still think the thing that Will Purdue is doing is a good endeavor. But yes, I mean, pragmatically speaking, that would be, you take care of those other things first, and then, okay, that's a way to keep athletics sustainable.
Yeah, I don't have a worry about football getting what they need. Now, I'm not talking about facilities and stuff. We've went over that. There's still needs there. But as far as having a roster, I was looking, guys, and y'all may disagree with me on this, but I used to always, every July when I worked there for the last 45 years, would go through and say, okay, who else could play in the SEC that's on this team? And I don't mean start or star, but be in the 2 deep or even play special teams or play, be a third team guy. And we used to be in the 20 to 30 range. I'm looking at guys that have played an SEC contest and done well. In other words, they run on the field and you don't say, oh gosh, so-and-so's in the game. We're up around 60. I don't ever remember Vanderbilt being like that. I don't. And I know other teams are better too. I get that. And but Vanderbilt's depth is better than it's ever been, ever.
Chris, you've been going to fall camp for forever. And I'm sure there's in the Franklin years, you go, okay, this team physically, they look the part. They'll compete this year. They'll be able to hold their own. There were some, and I didn't go to Mason fall camp, so I probably can't speak on that. But the last couple of years of the fall camps I've been to have been my first. So, that's all I've seen. But from what I've seen, I look at the team, and yeah, there's the outliers. There's your walk-ons. There's some guys that, you maybe don't feel great throwing on the field. But like you said, Luke, really everybody out there that's going to play, you're not too worried about, and you look at them at a practice and you go there, okay, this team can hold their own. And you saw it last year. You saw it against Alabama. You saw it against Texas, the team that was a playoff team. So, and that's why I'm interested in this fall camp too, to see when it starts, who's put on weight, who looks totally different, who do these new guys, sort of remind you of, or what do they look like?
Yeah, Luke, that's interesting. I think the aftermath of Derrick Mason, the first couple of years of Clark Lee, I would try to go count. I was like, 5 maybe that could play somewhere else. 60 feels a little steep to me, but we'll see. I mean, to me, it's just harder to tell now. Like, how does a guy that played at South Dakota State or somebody, how does that translate? I mean, okay, he might have excelled at that level. Does he run into a wall in the SEC physically that he's just not used to? There's a lot of mystery to me. But, I have looked at certain areas of the team, like defensive backs. Like, okay, they got a lot of corners that feel like they're capable of doing some things. We've talked about the improved depth on the offensive line. So I think there's 60 to me feels like a lot. I'm not saying you're wrong. You just don't know till they play somebody else, but it does feel like depth-wise they are in a much better space. Like, depth has always been a problem as long as I've followed them. I think the only guy that really fixed that for a few years was Franklin. Like, they could go 8 to 10 deep on the defensive line with bodies there. It's like, wow, that's not been a thing before. And maybe that was just the way that he pushed them physically. But, yeah, it does feel like they're in a different space than they are typically in with that.
Well, I want to say this on the defensive side of the ball, the linebackers that we have right now, and I throw Fontenette as a linebacker kind of. The depth we have at linebacker reminds me of the teams that Woody had that had Anthony Jordan, Jamie Winborn, Carlton Hall, those guys, Mark Jeffcoat.
Kirk Williams.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we've got 6 linebackers that are SEC caliber. I don't ever remember that, except maybe under Woody.
Okay, here's another good one about football, kind of tying everything in. From VU Fan 20, what would you say is the NIL allocation split between the offense and defense by percentage on this year's team? How would you say ours compares to other SEC teams? I consulted Robbie on this because I think Robbie's really good on the NIL front. And Robbie told me he thinks it's about 60% offense at least, because offense, you've got the 2 highest paid players, Diego Pavia and Stowers, and the offensive line transfers too. That's where it gets expensive as well. They brought in a lot of, basically an entire new offensive line. And, most SEC schools spend more on offense because the quarterback, it costs a lot to get a quarterback. Offensive line and wide receiver, those are high-end positions that cost you a lot. So maybe they didn't spend as much at receiver, but they paid Pavia, they got Stowers paid, and they paid some offensive linemen to come in and produce. Defensively, I think we know about Fontenette. A lot of those guys are returners, like we've talked about, and Mark Davis and Marlon Jones, who, they've already been here and they haven't been playing, but they were already with the team. So Robbie told me 60% offense. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but that's sort of the breakdown. And it's easy to say that based on, Pavia and Stowers. Those are the guys.
No, I agree with that. Probably. I will say this, though. I think we're better on the defensive side of the ball than we are on the offensive side of the ball, just strictly because of how many guys we got coming back that have contributed and they are kind of can't miss guys. Even though we may not have spent as much money on that side of the ball, I think we're more talented on defense.
Yeah, 60%, maybe a couple percentage points north would have been my guess for all the reasons you said.
Okay, Midges VU, going to basketball. I've been able to watch the best I could, a couple of pickup games of the current basketball team on a video that Frankie Collins provided about a month ago. It's hard to really gauge a whole lot, but they look pretty athletic and long. Anybody have any thoughts on the upcoming basketball season? It's hard to formulate a whole lot through pickup games, obviously, but Frankie Collins, I think, is going to be a leader of this team. You still got Tyler Tanner there, and he looks good. And again, this is through pickup games, but they look longer, and they had to get longer. They look more physical. Jalen Washington put it on the floor a lot. He's not just a four-man that lives in the paint. He's athletic. Mike James from NC State stood out. He hasn't played a ton of basketball the last couple of years, but a good shooter. And is a guy that kind of reminds you of Jason Edwards a little bit. Obviously not as high level of a scorer as Jason Edwards, but can put it in the basket. We know about Tyler Nickel. And then, you talk about the new guys, you start to forget about who they already have. That core is really important, guys. And McLaughlin, Nickel, and Tanner. And this system Byington doesn't miss a beat in this staff. And it feels like I'm sure they missed on a few guys in the portal and have missed on some recruits. But, Chris, they've been able to get as much as possible out of their system and the guys they have. And, they're going to be a different team. That's what I'll say. They'll be different. And Byington has said that. He's said that publicly, that we're going to have to switch our style because of the type of players we have.
Yeah, I feel like they're deeper with quality players than they've been since I can't even tell you when. Now, I don't know that there's a superstar in the bunch. We'll find out. But I feel like it's the best roster they've had since at least the Garland one, which obviously that's, that was a weird deal. But yeah,
well, and that was top. That
talented. Yeah, that was
sort of top heavy too.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they've got a lot of depth on this team that I don't think they've had in a while. I don't. Some workouts that somebody puts on a social media clip, that tells you nothing. I mean, let me watch them play for a couple hours, and then maybe I'll have a better idea. But just on paper, based on what they've done before, I feel pretty good about the roster.
Yeah, I went last year to watch them just scrimmage and run the floor and stuff. And this was early on. They were just starting to gel a little bit and figure out their roles. And if you'd had me pick a starting five that day, like MJ Collins, that day I was there, played better than anybody. But so I'd have had to put him in that starting five. He wound up being a role player, had some really good games, but was a role player. I think that's where we're at now. No matter what you see on film or whatever, is identifying the roles. And I think just about everybody in college basketball has to do that now because of the huge changeover in roster every year, except for like Florida. They know what they have. Alabama, pretty much. Most teams you got to figure if those pieces you bought to put this puzzle together fit. And I trust that Byington has. That's what I love about him. I've said it 1,000 times. He's a gym rat. Doesn't have many hobbies. It's all basketball all day long. And I feel like he'll be able to put it together, and we'll have another NCAA type team.
VU Hick 66. Sorry, it's another football one I let slip through the cracks. If the young tight end is as good as they are saying, can you see the staff putting him on the field as a wide receiver this year? I would guess he's saying Bryson Coleman. That would be my guess as young tight end. Yeah, I mean, we saw him, Chris, in fall camp last year make some ridiculous catches. And then he got hurt, and that was a shame because I thought he was going to play. I thought they were going to find ways to put him in the game. Luke, he'll play, and I could see him as a sort of a flex tight end receiver type this year.
Yeah, him, Whit Edwards. You got a lot of guys. That's why I was talking about how we have guys that can play and make plays in the SEC. We have 8 receivers, and none of them stand out. Of course, Junior, what you have in him. What you have in Richie Hoskins, but there's 6 or 7 guys. You got to figure at some of those 6 or 7 guys, if just 1 or 2 of them step up and have a decent year, then we're going to be fine on offense. And I'm assuming also we'll take better care of Pavia and not get him beat up. with the offensive line improvements that should happen.
Yeah, don't count Cole Spence out either. I still think he's a gifted player.
No doubt.
Absolutely. Okay, last one. We're going baseball, and I think we've answered this 3 or 4 times, but I do want to get to it from J.R. Hershey. I know it's still early. We're waiting to see how the draft shakes out, but can you please do a first look baseball lineup projection for 2026? I'm wondering how all the transfers fit in. He wants to hear about key depth pieces, weekend starters, midweek starter, key arms out of the pen. Chris, just to reiterate, Colin Barzey is going to be your catcher. Carter Johnstone will likely play third base. You would think Brody Johnston plays short. Riker Wade has been playing well up in the Cape, so keep an eye on him. Second base, Rustin Rigdon, you would think most likely. You've also got Mancini. So does Mancini slot in at second, and do you put Rigdon in the outfield, either center or left? Nelson's the biggest question right now. I still don't know. I mean, that is as close to 50-50. I might even lean he'd go pro at this point, barely. But he's your first baseman if he's back. If not, maybe Mac Whitcomb in there. You might think he could also catch while Barzey's not. He could also be your DH. Left field, Braden Holcomb. He was your left fielder last year. Maybe you also slide him at first. Rigdon could play some left field. Rigdon could play some center. That's where I might slot Rigdon in right now. Then right field, you'd put Logan Johnstone, Carter's brother. And then pitching, Chris, you're good with the pitchers. You got Fennell. We've talked about it, but I think the bigger question here, Chris, is who do you get out of the draft? Who do who slips through the cracks of the draft and the young guys? What kind of a shot do they have to get DeBrun and Gamble? I think that's interesting. Where do they slot? Cooper Fleming is a guy that, where does he land? Talon Haley. You're not getting Hernandez, but DeBrun and Gamble. That's what I'm watching right now.
Yeah, I mean, Nelson is the wild card. If he's back, he's their first baseman. If not, I think it's Max Jensen. I don't think you mentioned Mac Whitcomb. Maybe you did. He's going to be in there somewhere, DH. I think they will find a spot for Mancini. Maybe that's back at second with Rigdon playing the outfield, or Rigdon could play third with Holcomb going to a corner spot. I mean, there's so many possibilities there. And I'll throw this out just as a dart throw. Chris Maldonado's still on the team. I wouldn't totally count out an impact from him. He's shown it before 2 years ago. He's not been the same guy since the injuries. There's always somebody every year that contributes that you didn't really think. So I think that's another one too. I really like their lineup. And the Waite one that you mentioned also is worth watching. He's had a couple of good summers. So you've got that. I think the other one, I'm really watching Bowker and where he gets picked. I think if Bowker comes back, he is a really, really good number 2 and maybe a pretty good number 1 if they can build some stamina. My guess is Nye is their one. It could be Bowker if he's back. I think Kranzler's the guy that stands to benefit if Bowker's not back. Fennell could be in the rotation. I still love the way they used him last year. I would be inclined to keep Fennell in that emergency role. You're in a 3-3 game with the bases loaded in the third and bring him in and maybe he can finish it. And then the bullpen, I just, Cyber, Green, Guth, Tommy O'Rourke's back. And we haven't even talked Matthew Shorey or Hudson Barton, two really talented freshmen, or England Bryan. They've got a ton there. I really think if things break well for them, they are potentially on that short list of national title contenders before the season starts.
Yeah, you guys have covered it well. I do want to ask a couple questions of you guys, more on the pitching side of things. If Bowker comes back, the kid that came in from the Ivy League, his name escapes me. Right? Is he
Jacob Faulkner? Is
he going to be more of a bridge guy, a setup guy? What would you say his role would be?
Maybe. I think he's a different arm angle, although with a higher velo than like a Brian Miller threw at. I think he's a wild card. I think he could be used a lot of ways.
All right.
Yeah, I think of him maybe a little bit like Fennell, who could be an extended guy where if you have a guy a starter, for example, Austin Nye on a Saturday, who gets hit around, only goes 2 innings. Faulkner could be that guy to finish the game, maybe, and kind of take it from there, at least, a good bit of that. But yeah, Faulkner. I forgot about Max Jensen too. I always forget about those 2 guys that have been here for a while, have been committed for a while.
Right.
But
I really like the class they have brought in. I know it's not getting the headlines that other people have gotten, but man, I look at what they needed and what these guys produced the level at next year, and the fact that you've got this coming year, you could have 9 guys in the lineup that have all got popped to varying degrees, depending on what Rignan does. If he can take a step up there, he's worth keeping the lineup anyway. But I think you'll see the most home runs out of a Vanderbilt team that you'll have seen in a while, with wherever it settles next year.
One other,
and again, go ahead, Luke.
I'm sorry. One other question: is there any chance? Because I feel like the one place we're thin is outfielders. Is there any chance Mancini could become a left fielder or right fielder?
Yeah, he's pretty athletic, man. He can really run. I think, and he's played a lot of ball. I'm guessing he's played outfield at some point or is adaptable. I think that's one that I would keep an eye on, because I think, I mean, like if they get Gamble and Slater to run through the draft, which I doubt they'll get both, and they'll find options there. And I mean, and that's not considering Austin. I think Austin's gone, but you never know. I think Mancini's athletic enough he could play outfield for sure.
Saw your Hawks either.
Yeah, Hawks is a wild card. Hawks could either go or stay, from what I've heard.
Yeah, I meant to bring this up. The MLB pipeline rankings, the latest ones are out. It's interesting to look at this. J.D. Thompson was the highest rated guy at number 66, which that's rare. I mean, yeah, he's moved up. Okay. And then R.J. Austin's at 112, Cody Bowker at 187. So odds are those guys go. Right. Sawyer Hawks at 225. So that's interesting. Riley Nelson's not ranked, which surprised me a little bit.
But
Seth
he
Hernandez,
is at, I think, hang on, I'll pull it up, because Nelson did crash a couple of ratings lately.
Okay.
Which
Seth
probably
Hernandez
should make you a little nervous if you're Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
While you guys are looking that up, where do you think the...
Oh, we lost
Wow.
Luke.
We can't blame your internet this time.
I know. That's usually when you get a phone call, your screen goes dark, and because the phone is using your audio at this point.
I'm keeping a composite, just kind of based on, I'm using BA, Athletic, MLB Pipeline, and right now, let's see, I'll just run down. Seth Hernandez sitting there at 7. He's not coming, barring something crazy. DeBrun at 22, Gamble at 39, Thompson at 49. You're right, he was 66 in Pipeline. That's the lowest one. Athletic had J.D. Thompson at 33. I think he was a better pitcher than people realized. So that's one to watch. Like, I don't think he slips into the first round, but you never know if he gets an underslot deal. I think he's a second rounder. Fleming is what?
My Pipeline has him at 82.
My composite that I did has got him at 82. Let me go down. I'll give you the rest of them. Aiden Stillman, 92. Talon Haley, 93. R.J. Austin, 107. Bowker, 136, but some have got him much higher. And there's a couple more in here. Well, we haven't gotten to Nelson yet.
Guys, before I went off the air, my question was going to be, where do you guys think the cutoff is for most of these guys? In other words, if they're 200 below, 150 below, where do you think guys sign or come back?
Well, it's just about the money, right, Chris?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, off the top of my head, 120-ish feels like a close to the cutoff point. I don't know if NIL and ability to pay and full scholarships changes that now. That's another thing. Let's see, a couple more prospects I had in there. Wyatt Nadeau, 315 commitment. Tyler Baird, commitment 301. And Miller Green was in the 300 somewhere. I think he's coming back 377. Draft eligible sophomore. Where did Nelson land? I know Nelson is in here, and Hawks is at 464.
Hawks,
I think
you
I
would
missed
think.
Nelson. Yeah, I don't know.
Hawks,
Just
you would think
depends.
comes back.
I don't know how there's 483 prospects better than Sawyer Hawks, but that's where he is.
Not
If
a bad-
somebody watched him play, then I think they're going to be having a higher opinion. And I can't find Nelson, but I think Nelson was somewhere in the mid 200s.
It's going to be interesting to see where all this baseball stuff sorts out. The MLB draft is July. Oh, is that
Saturday?
That's
Sunday.
July?
It's Sunday.
That's Sunday. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Sunday it all kicks off. So we'll see. It's rarity. You're not expected to see somebody go in the first round, potentially JD Thompson, you would guess, and of course the signees, but be interested to see what happens. But guys, we got to wrap it up. That was a hefty episode, and got a lot of football in there. Got all three major sports in there. I do want to tell you guys a few things before we wrap it up. This podcast has always been free. We plan for it to stay that way. Here's how you can help us. Give us a rating and a review on the podcast, which helps us get noticed. Go subscribe to Vandy247.com. That helps us a ton. We got all kinds of coverage up there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video. Fire away your comments and questions. That is free. For Chris Lee, Luke Wyatt, I'm Billy Derrick. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the Vandy 247 podcast.